I don't know how long I have been walking. Time does not function here in the way it functions where I came from. In the place I used to call home, time was a river. It flowed forward, carrying debris and memories, moving from a source to a sea. Here, time is a stagnant pool. It sits heavy and motionless, evaporating slowly into the thick, musty air, only to condense on the ceiling and drip back down. I check my wrist, a reflex born of a life I no longer inhabit, but the watch is gone. Or maybe it stopped, or maybe I never had one. The concept of a minute, an hour, a day. These are measurements of a world that operates on the rotation of a planet around a star. There are no stars here. There is no planet. There is only this endless, maddening, monochromatic existence. I remember the fall. That is the last sharp memory I possess. A jagged shard of glass in a pile of soft, eroding sandstone. I was walking. It was a Tuesday, I think. The pavement was gray. The sky was a pale, washed, out blue. I tripped. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was the kind of stumble you correct in a split second. A momentary loss of balance that sends a flush of embarrassment to your cheeks as you look around to see if anyone noticed. But my foot didn't find the concrete. It didn't find the earth. It found nothing. There was a sensation of slipping, not through air, but through something viscous, like passing through a heavy curtain made of static electricity. The world folded in on itself, geometries intersecting in angles that shouldn't exist. And then silence, and then the hum. That is the first thing you notice. Before your eyes adjust, before you smell the mildew, you hear it. It is the sound of electricity dying. It is the sound of 10,000 fluorescent lights buzzing in unison. A drone that sits right at the edge of hearing, low and grating. It burrows into the base of your skull and vibrates against your teeth. It is the soundtrack of purgatory. I open my eyes expecting the gray pavement, expecting the scrape of asphalt on my palms. Instead, my hand sank into something damp, carpet. It is a shade of beige that defies description. It is not quite tan, not quite brown, but a sickly desaturated yellow that looks like it has been stained by decades of cigarette smoke and neglect. It smells of old water. You know that smell, the scent of a basement that flooded years ago and was never properly dried out. It is the smell of rot arrested in development, a decay that is preserved and eternal. I stood up, brushing the phantom dust from my knees, and looked around. Walls. Endless walls. They are covered in wallpaper that mimics a pattern but never actually repeats. If you stare at it too long, your eyes try to find the logic in it. You look for the seam where the roll ended and the next one began. But there are no seams. The pattern swirls and abruptly stops, intersecting with another pattern that looks identical but is fundamentally wrong. It is the architecture of a fever dream. The yellow is oppressive. It reflects the light from above, casting everything in a jaundiced haze. I started walking. That was the only thing to do. In the beginning, I thought this was a building. An office complex, perhaps, abandoned in the middle of a renovation. I called out, "Hello." My voice didn't echo. The carpet and the acoustic tiles on the ceiling swallowed the sound instantly. It felt as if the air itself was heavy, dampening the vibrations of my vocal cords. Is anyone there? Silence, just the hum, the buzzing of the lights. I walked for what felt like minutes, then hours. I turned corners expecting to find a reception desk, a window, an elevator, a fire exit, anything that indicated design or purpose. But there was nothing, just room after room of empty, yellow space. Sometimes the hallways are narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders. Sometimes they open up into vast, sprawling chambers with pillars spaced irregularly, supporting a ceiling that sags under the weight of unseen pipes. There is a distinct psychological terror in realizing that you are not in a maze. A maze has a solution. A maze is built by someone who wants you to find the exit, or at least challenges you to find it. This is not a maze. This is a glitch. It is a random generation of space that serves no function. The walls are placed without rhyme or reason. I have walked down a hallway for a mile only to find a dead end, a blank yellow wall staring back at me. I have turned a corner to find a room that is perfectly square, with no other doors forcing me to turn back. I tried to leave a trail. I had a pen in my pocket, a cheap, blue ballpoint pen. I decided I would mark the walls, drawing an arrow to indicate where I had come from. I marked the wallpaper, the ink looking dark and violent against the pale yellow. I walked for 100 paces, turned left, walked another 100 paces, and turned left again. I should have been back at the start. I should have seen my mark. But the wall was clean. The wallpaper was pristine. At first, I thought I was lost, that my internal compass was broken by the uniformity of the environment. But I tried it again. I marked a wall, walked 10 feet away, turned my back, and counted to 10. When I turned around, the mark was gone. The room had reset, or perhaps the room I was in was not the room I had just left. The space here is fluid. It shifts when you aren't looking. It denies you the comfort of a landmark. You cannot map this place. You can only inhabit it. I sat down against a wall, the dampness of the carpet seeping through my jeans. I felt a cold wetness against my skin. The carpet is always moist, not soaked, just unpleasantly damp, like a sponge that has been squeezed out but not dried. I wondered where the water comes from. There are no pipes, no leaks, no rain. It is just a fundamental property of this reality. Moisture, mold. Yellow, I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. That was when the panic truly set in. In the darkness of my closed eyelids, the hum became louder. It amplified until it sounded like a scream. I opened my eyes, gasping, heart hammering against my ribs. The lights do not turn off. They do not flicker. They just burn, a constant, sterile white heat that offers no warmth, only illumination. There is no night here. There is no day. There is only the now, stretched out into infinity. I began to run. I don't know why. Instinct, perhaps, the primal urge to flee from a predator, even though there was no predator to be seen. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. I sprinted through room after room, sliding on the damp carpet, bouncing off the walls. I wanted to find something different, a different color. A chair, a piece of trash, a dead insect. Anything that would prove that this place was part of a reality that included life and decay. But there was nothing. The consistency is absolute. The yellow wallpaper does not peel. The carpet does not fray. The lights do not burn out. It is a perfection of awfulness. It is a monument to the mundane. As I slowed to a walk, gasping for air that tasted stale and metallic, I began to think about where I was. The theories came to me in fragments. Memories of late-night internet browsing, obscure forums, ghost stories, the backrooms. I had read about them, laughed about them. A creepypasta, a digital campfire story. But the texture of the wall under my fingers was not a story. The smell of the moist carpet was not a digital image. This was tactile. This was real. If this is real, then the world I came from is the lie. Or perhaps the world I came from is the surface, and I have fallen beneath it. I have clipped through the geometry of the universe and landed in the developer's debug room, the place where they stored the textures and assets they didn't know what to do with. But why this? Why this specific, soul-crushing aesthetic? Why the yellow wallpaper? Why the fluorescent lights? Is this hell? It doesn't feel like hell. Hell implies punishment. Hell implies that there is a judge, a moral framework, a reason for suffering. There is no reason here. This place is indifferent to me. It does not care if I scream or cry or die. It simply exists. I am an anomaly in its structure, a variable that wasn't accounted for. I am a dust mite on the lens of a projector. I wonder about the others. The stories said there were entities, monsters, things that hunt you. I have seen nothing in a way. That is worse. If there were a monster, there would be a dynamic. There would be a hunter and a hunted. There would be a struggle. There would be another consciousness, however, alien and malicious, acknowledging my existence. But here, I am alone. The solitude is a physical weight. It presses down on my shoulders. It fills my ears. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I recited the alphabet. I recited the names of everyone I had ever known. Mom, Dad, Sarah, Michael. I listed the capitals of countries. I listed the ingredients of a lasagna. But my voice sounded thin and weak, swallowed instantly by the acoustic dampening of the room. And slowly the names began to feel abstract. Did I really know a Sarah? What did she look like? I tried to conjure her face in my mind, but all I could see was the yellow wallpaper. The yellow is bleeding into my memories. It is staining my past. I realized I was hungry, but not in the way I get hungry back home. My stomach wasn't growling. I didn't feel weak. It was a mental hunger, a desire for consumption, for change. I haven't eaten in. I don't know how long, but I am not starving. I am not dying of thirst. It seems that the biology of the old world does not apply here either. I am in stasis. I am a preserved specimen. I could walk for 1,000 years and my body would not wither. I would just continue to walk, and the lights would continue to buzz, and the carpet would continue to be damp. That thought terrified me more than the thought of death. Death is an end. Death is a release. This is a loop. This is eternity without variety. I sat down again. I stared at the ceiling tiles. They are square, dotted with tiny, irregular holes. I started counting the holes in one tile, 142. I counted the holes in the next tile, 142. I counted the next 143. A variation of flaw. I laughed, a dry, cracking sound that hurt my throat. I stared at that extra dot, that tiny imperfection in the plaster. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was chaos. It was uniqueness. I reached up to touch it, standing on my tiptoes, but the ceiling was just out of reach. I jumped, my fingers brushing the rough surface, but I couldn't touch the dot. I slumped back against the wall. The euphoria faded, replaced by a dark, heavy depression. It is just a ceiling tile. It doesn't mean anything. I began to hallucinate. I think they were hallucinations. I saw movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow darting behind a pillar, a darkening of the wallpaper in the distance. I spun around, adrenaline spiking, but there was nothing, just the empty, yellow hallway stretching out into the distance. "Is someone there?" I whispered. The hum of the lights seemed to change pitch, modulating into something that sounded almost like a human voice, mumbling in a language I couldn't understand. I pressed my ear against the wall. I wanted to hear what was on the other side. Was there another room, or was there the void? I listened. At first, just the hum. But then underneath the electric buzz, I heard something else. A scratching, faint rhythmic scratching, like fingernails on dry wall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from inside the wall. I pulled away, horrified. I stared at the wallpaper, half expecting it to tear open for something to claw its way out, but the surface remained unbroken. The scratching stopped. Was it real? Or is my mind finally snapping under the pressure of the sensory deprivation? The brain craves input. When it gets nothing but mono yellow and buzzing, it starts to create its own stimuli. It creates ghosts. It creates monsters. Maybe I am the monster. Maybe this place is a reflection of my own mind. Empty, repetitive, anxious. Maybe I never clipped out of reality. Maybe I just finally woke up to what reality actually is. A series of empty rooms that we fill with distractions to keep from screaming. I stood up. I have to keep moving. I have to keep moving. I have developed a theory. If this place is infinite, then statistically, everything must exist somewhere within it. If you have an infinite number of monkeys hitting keys on a typewriter, eventually they will write the complete works of Shakespeare. If I have an infinite number of yellow rooms, eventually, statistically, one of them must contain an exit, or a staircase, or a window, or a bottle of water. So I walk, one foot in front of the other, the squish of the damp carpet, the buzz of the lights. I have started to notice subtle changes in the environment. Or maybe I am imagining them. Sometimes the yellow seems a shade darker, almost mustard. Sometimes it seems paler, like cream. Sometimes the hum is a B flat. Sometimes it is a C sharp. These are the events of my life now. These are the headlines of my world. Today, the hum was slightly higher. Today, the carpet felt wetter than usual. I found a room yesterday. I call it yesterday, though it was just a period of time before this one that was different. It was small, barely a closet, and in the corner on the floor was a stain, a dark irregular blotch on the carpet. I fell to my knees and examined it. It looked like coffee or dried blood. I touched it. It was dry and crusty. I felt a surge of emotion that almost brought me to tears. Someone had been here. Someone else had existed. They had spilled something. They had left a mark that the room hadn't erased. I sat by that stain for a long time. I treated it like a shrine. I spoke to it. I told it about my life, about the world of blue skies and gray pavement. I told it about the woman I think I loved whose face I can no longer remember. I asked the stain where its creator went. Did they find a way out, or did they dissolve into the carpet, leaving only this dark residue behind? Eventually, I had to leave the stain. I couldn't stay in a closet forever. I had to find the statistical anomaly. I had to find the Shakespeare in the typewriter. I am walking again. My legs are numb. My mind is a fog of static and yellow noise. I feel like I am becoming part of the architecture. I feel like if I stand still for too long, the wallpaper will grow over my skin, sealing me into the wall, and I will become just another bump in the pattern, another irregularity for the next traveler to count. Wait, I see something. Up ahead, the lights. They are different. The hum is louder here. It's aggressive. It vibrates in my chest. But the lights, one of them is flickering. It's a strobe effect in the endless monotony on, off. It casts dancing shadows that stretch and contort against the walls. Shadows that look like long, thin limbs. Shadows that look like fingers. I should be afraid. My instincts are screaming at me to turn around, to run back to the safety of the stable, buzzing yellow. But I can't. It's something new. It's something different. I am walking toward the flickering light. The corridor is getting darker. The yellow is turning into a sickly, bruised brown. The smell is changing too. The mildew is gone, replaced by something coppery, something metallic. The carpet is no longer damp. It is soggy. My shoes make a wet, sucking sound with every step. I look down. The fluid seeping up around my soles is not clear water. It is thick. It is dark. I'm standing under the flickering light now. I look down the hallway. The geometry is shifting. The walls are no longer straight. They are curving, closing in, like the throat of a giant beast. And in the distance, far down the twisting corridor, the hum stops. Silence. Absolute heavy silence. And then a sound. Not a buzz, not a hum. A footstep, a wet, heavy footstep, and then another. It is coming toward me. I am not alone anymore. I don't know if I should scream or laugh. I am terrified. I am trembling. But at least it is not just me on the wallpaper anymore. At least something is happening. I turn to face the darkness. I brace myself against the yellow wall. I wait. The footsteps get closer. I close my eyes and listen. The silence is over. The yellow is over. Something new is beginning.